Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 9, verse 3. Chapter 9, verse 3. Moshe Rabbeinu was speaking to the Jewish people, and he says, V'yodato hayom, you should know today, ki Hashem Elokecha hu over lefanecha, that Hashem, your God, passes before you. Eisho chla, he is a consuming flame. Hu yashmideim v'hu yachdiim lefanecha. He will conquer those who stand before you. He will humble those who stand before you. V'orashtam v'avadotam maher. You will drive them out. You will destroy. He's speaking about the residents of Israel, presumably. You will drive them out. You will destroy them quickly. Kasher diber Hashem lach, like God said to you. Just a very interesting Orach Chaim on this pasuk, relatively brief. So the beginning of the verse says, "You should know today." Okay. I mean, they're not going into Israel today. They don't have any fights today. Why do they have to know it today? You should know. You should know that God is very powerful and will protect you. Orach Chaim on pasuk Gimel, v'yodato hayom. Hutzrach lomar hayom. It needs to say in the pasuk today, liha'iram, to arouse them, to inspire them. Shelo ad acher boam el haaretz v'yirshu am gadol oz yatzdiku zeh. Elomei hayom yedu v'yatzdiku davar zeh. Shehu ha'over. A very basic point from the Orach Chaim, but I think very true to our lives in general. This information is particularly relevant once the Jewish people go into the land of Israel and begin to wage war on the residents. So you might say to yourself, I don't have to think about this stuff now. When it's relevant, I'll think about it. Says the Orach Chaim that what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying is you need to internalize now that God has done all this wonderful things for you. God will continue to do wonderful things for you. Because if you wait until then to internalize these ideas, they're going to be gone. When great things happen to you, you need to process it at the time. That was just an interesting idea. Okay, let's jump ahead now to verse 28. This is the context of the golden calf, and the golden calf has occurred, and Moshe Rabbeinu is in the midst of davening that the Jewish people should be forgiven. And in verse 28, he says, Pen Yomru, lest the residents of the land from which you took us out, Egypt, will say as follows: maybe they'll say God's not able to bring them to the land which he spoke about. And because of his hatred of them, maybe God's not able to take the Jews into the land of Israel, and the only reason he took them out of Egypt in the first place was to kill them in the desert, because he hates them. Do you want people to say that? Do you want people to think that? Hashem, if you destroy the Jewish people, the Egyptians will think that. Don't create that situation. Now, what's very interesting is there's a fundamental difference between what Moshe says to God, what will the people say if you punish them for the sin of the spies, and what will the people say if you punish for the sin of the golden calf? And we'll see the Ramban to discuss this difference. If you look at the Ramban on Pasuk Chaf Ches, Amar b'Meraglim, in the context of the spies, when Moshe davens, that Hashem should save the Jewish people, he says that people will say as follows: Milbilti yicholes Hashem lavi es ha'amazel artisha nishbalohem vayishchatem bamidbar. With the spies, Moshe says, if you destroy the nation now, people will say that you didn't have the ability to bring them into the land of Israel, and therefore you killed them in the desert. But that's not what it says in this pasuk. By the golden calf, he says, and the fact that you took them out of Egypt is because you hate them. In other words, he says you're not able to bring them into the land of Israel, and the fact that you took them out of Egypt is because you hate them. He didn't say that by the spies. He just said, people will think you're not able to take the Jews into the land of Israel, and that's why you killed them. Klomar, that is to say, Yomru, people will say, Kikasher ba'u, vayu krovim la'aretz, that when the Jewish people got close to the land of Israel, Vira, she'nicholas biyado k'negedo am mahem, shchatam bamidbar. They'll say, God leaped before he looked. God took the Jews out of Egypt. God brought the Jews through the desert. And now when it comes to crunch time, when they're about to embark on the land of Israel, God looks around and says, gosh, I can't handle that. I can't handle those residents. And therefore, people will say that that's why you are destroying the Jewish people in the aftermath of the sin of the spies. But here in the context of the golden calf, which is earlier in the story, Moshe says, Moshe adds in this other piece that people will say that it's because of your enmity of the Jewish people that you took them out of Egypt in the first place. Implying that God had a hatred for the Jewish people before he even took them out. Why is Moshe bringing that up? Where is that coming from? Vahatam, the reason is, Bavur Shahaya B'masa Egel, Adayin Krovim LeMitzrayim, Recholkim Meretz Canaan. With the story of the golden calf, the Jewish people were far from the land of Israel. The Jewish people were far closer to the land of Egypt. Yomru, Kigam B'Yosem Mitzrayim Yada, She'en Yicholas B'Yado Laviyam El Aretz Sher Diber Lahem Bosnei Mitzrayim. See, if in the context of the golden calf, Moshe Rabbeinu would say, God, if you destroy the Jewish people, people will say that you couldn't take them into the land of Israel. Well, they're not right by the border. They're far from the land of Israel, which means that God would have recognized before taking them out of Egypt that he can't take them into the land of Israel. So if he recognizes before taking them out of Egypt that he can't take them into the land of Israel, why did he even take them out of Egypt? V'yaukein sneam levilti heichel leinei agoyim asher noda aleim leineim. So therefore, the Ramban explains what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying here is people won't think that you couldn't handle the residents of Israel. People will think that, but people will think, gosh, if he knew so early in the game that he couldn't handle the residents of Israel, why did he even take the Jews out of Egypt in the first place? And people will assume it must be that you hate the Jews. It must be this was all a ploy just to destroy them. That's not necessary in the context of the spies. Because in the context of the spies, people will say, oh, it's like right when he gets up to the edge, that's when he says, oh, I can't handle it. So maybe he took the Jews out of Egypt with good intentions. He just realizes he gets closer, he can't handle it. So that's an interesting Ramban discussing this difference. Okay, let's go on now to chapter 10, verse 1. Chapter 10, verse 1. Okay. Boesahi, at that time, Omar Hashem Elai, Hashem said to me, Psol lecha shnei luchos avonim karishonim, va'alei Elai hara. God said to me, chisel out 2 stone tablets as the first ones were, and come up to me at the mountain. V'yasisa lecha Aaron eitz, and make for yourself a wooden ark. Verse 2, I wrote, God says, I will write on the tablets the same words, similar to the words that I wrote on the first tablets, and you should place these tablets in the ark which you create. Verse 3, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I made this ark out of cedar wood, and I chiseled 2 tablets, and I brought these 2 stone tablets up to the mountain. This is for, of course, the second of the 10 commandments, the second set of the 10 commandments. Verse 4, God wrote on the tablets in the same basic way that he wrote on the first set of tablets. The 10 commandments, which God conveyed to you. And then God gave me the tablets. Verse 5, and I turned around, and I came down from the mountain, and I placed the tablets in this ark which I created, which God told me to create. And the tablets were in the ark as God commanded me. Okay, very basic question. Once the Mishkan is built, an aron, an ark, is part of that construction plan. Okay, we discuss with the building of the Mishkan, the building of the aron. Okay, God tells Moshe to build an aron. This is obviously before the Mishkan is built. God tells Moshe to build an ark in which the second set of tablets will be housed. What exactly, if anything, is this first ark that Moshe builds used for once the Mishkan is in operation? In other words, there's a new ark. What goes in the new ark in the Mishkan? Presumably, the tablets go in the new ark. So what's the old ark used for? Just a basic enough question. Let's look at the Ramban on Pasuk Aleph. We're going to start around 10 lines into the Ramban on Pasuk Aleph. V'tam v'yiyusham kershet tzivani Hashem. What it means in the pasuk when it says that the tablets, the second tablets, were placed in the Aron as God commanded me, shahayusham ad shenasa mishkan, that the second set of tablets were in this Aron until the Mishkan was built. Shetzivani v'nasatos hakapores al Aron mamalavil ha'aron titein es hoidus asher etein elecha. Because once the Mishkan is built, it's pretty clear that Moshe is supposed to place the second tablets in the Aron of the Mishkan. This is the straightforward understanding of how things work in these verses. The cus of Rashi, Rashi clarifies over here that the Aron which Moshe makes is not the Aron which Betzalel will make for the Mishkan. Rashi says they only involve themselves in the Mishkan after Yom Kippur. And Moshe Rabbeinu comes down with the second set of Luchos on Yom Kippur. Rashi says that only once Moshe Rabbeinu came down from the mountain on Yom Kippur with the second tablets does Moshe instruct them about the whole concept of building a Mishkan. Betzalel first worked on the basic concept of the Mishkan, and then he got involved with the vessels of the Mishkan, including the Aron. Nimtza ze acher hoya. So Rashi says, obviously, this ark that Moshe builds here, which is the original residence of the second Luchos, is a different ark than the ark of the Mishkan. This ark would be used when they would go to war. When they would go to war and they would want to bring the special divine presence with them, they would, as a special merit for them, they would bring this ark which Moshe created before the Mishkan. And that ark that Betzalel makes in conjunction with the Mishkan, would not go with them to war. It would stay back with the Mishkan. Ella bimei Eli, the one time that Klal Yisrael took the Aron from the Mishkan construct and brought it to war is the famous story with Eli, where Eli had his sons, as a special merit for the Jewish people, bring the Aron of Hashem to war against the Plishtim, and the Aron was taken, and there was and by the Plishtim, and there was terrible defeat and destruction for the Jewish people. There was terrible punishment. Eli dies in the chain of events. But this is what Rashi says. V'yesh lishel, but the Ramban says one could pose the question: V'achar shehotzi misham haluchos unesanam ba'aron she'asa Betzalel mehaya bazeh. I'm sure many, if not all of you, were wondering about this basic question that Ramban just poses. Let me get this straight. There's a set of luchos. Moshe originally puts the set of luchos in this Aron that he constructs. Then the Mishkan is built and there's a new Aron. Great. Moshe takes the luchos and places them in the new Aron in the Mishkan. He asks Rashi, what's the old Aron going to be used for? He says, well, when they go to war, they'll take the old Aron with them. What's in the old Aron? Are they just taking an empty Aron with them to war? Is that the point? V'lama hu yotze imoyam lemochama. Why would an empty Aron be taken with them to war? V'yomrim sheshivri luchos hayusham v'chein ba'agada. So there are those who say, says the Ramban, and there's a midrashic source for this, there are those who say that the first set of luchos, the broken tablets, were kept in this older Aron. And so when they would go to war, they would take the older Aron with the broken tablets. So the luchos, the new luchos, would stay back in the Aron of the Mishkan, and the broken luchos will go in this older Aron. The Ramban is going to discuss this. We'll get into that tomorrow, God willing. But just to sum up what we spoke about today, we spoke about this idea of the Orach Chaim regarding reflecting on the great powers of God today, not waiting until we need to reflect on them, but internalizing the idea now. We discussed the Ramban regarding the difference of Moshe's prayer for the Jews in the aftermath of the golden calf versus in the aftermath of the sin of the spies. And we began discussing this question of what exactly the first Aron was used for once the Aron of the Mishkan was built.